Imagine you're home alone. You're not watching anything. There's no background noise, and suddenly you hear it. Your name being called from another room. Now, let me ask you something. Would you go looking for whatever it was that called your name, or would you just pretend you didn't hear it? Hey, friends, welcome back to the Spooky Files. If you're returning, thank you so much for coming back. If you're new here, we're so glad to have you. I'm your host, Mary Ellen Quigley. This is where we dive into the paranormal, the unexplained, the I swear I saw something, but I don't want to admit it moments that we all have and now have a place to talk about it. So let's think back to the situation. Someone calling your name, but when you turn around, there's no one there. I think most of us have had that happen at least once, but we all do the same thing. We brush it off, we ignore it, we tell ourselves it was coming from outside, or maybe we forgot to turn a radio or a TV off. But what if it wasn't? What if something actually said your name on purpose? That's what today's episode is about. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's get into it. Our first story is called The Basement, and this one comes from someone who wishes to remain anonymous. They say, "Hi, Mary. I've gone back and forth on sending this, but I can't really explain it, and I still think about it all the time. I grew up in a completely normal house, just a basic 2-story house with a finished basement. It was only about 10 years old when my parents bought it, so there wasn't much of a history either. For most of my life, nothing weird ever happened until I was about 14. My parents both worked late, so I was used to being home alone in the afternoon. It wasn't a big deal. I'd watch TV, do homework, talk to my friends, whatever. And one day, I went downstairs to the basement to switch over the laundry. But as I got to the bottom of the stairs, I heard my mom's voice call my name, as clear as day. I stopped immediately because that didn't make sense. She wasn't supposed to be home yet. At first I thought maybe she had gotten back and I didn't hear her come in. But then I realized something. The voice wasn't coming from upstairs. It was coming from the basement, behind me. I turned around, looked. I didn't see anything, but then it happened again. My name. And then it said, "Come here." Same voice, same tone, completely normal sounding. And I don't know why, but something in me just knew that wasn't my mom. I didn't go looking for it. I didn't say anything back. I just turned around and ran up the stairs. I grabbed my phone and called my mom. She answered from work, and it was the normal background noise from work. Coworkers talking, phones ringing, and I asked her straight up, "Are you home?" She laughed and said, "No, why?" I told her I thought I heard her voice. She kind of brushed it off and said maybe it was the TV or something outside, but I knew it wasn't. And I tried to convince myself that this was a one-time thing, but it wasn't. Over the next few months, it kept happening. Sometimes it was my mom's voice, sometimes it was my dad, and a few times it was my own voice calling my name from another room. And that's the part I've never been able to explain. When I moved away to college, the voice stopped, and I haven't heard it since. So if you are familiar with the paranormal, this is actually a pretty common paranormal experience, and it's really popularly talked about on TikTok, especially right now, because this is what's commonly referred to as a mimic, which, true to its name, a mimic mimics someone close to you. It could be yourself, it could be a loved one, but the whole idea is they are pretending to be someone else. There are a million explanations as to why they exist and what their purpose is. Some people say they're demons, some people say they're trickster spirits, but the general consensus is that these are evil spirits and that you should not interact with them. In fact, the recommendation that everyone gives is to not even respond to a mimic. The reason they are so creepy is because if it was something growling or whispering or just extra obviously creepy, you'd turn and run and you wouldn't interact. But when it sounds like someone you trust or someone you love, that pulls you in. And that's why these are so dangerous. I am so glad that the voices stopped once you moved out of the house. So thank you for sharing your story with us. The second story is called The Hospital, and this one comes from Jessica, who works in healthcare. And I feel like I've heard similar stories to this quite often, which makes me never want to work in a nursing home. She says, "Hi, Mary. I'm a nurse. I've worked nights for years, and I've seen a lot of things that are hard to explain, but this is the only one that actually made me leave a shift early. I was working at a nursing home at the time, and this happened around 3 o'clock in the morning, which, if you've ever been awake at that hour, you already know it's a vibe. It's called the witching hour on purpose because everything just feels heavier than any other time of day. I was at the nurse's station doing charting. Most of my patients were asleep, and it was one of those rare calm nights where no one really needed anything. And then I heard it. Someone said my name, Jessica. I looked up right away thinking it was one of the other nurses, but the hallway was empty. No one was walking, no one was talking. I even got up and checked a couple of rooms just to be sure, but there was nothing. So I went back to the desk, and a few minutes later, it happened again. But this time they said, Jessica, help me. But this time it was closer, and I knew that voice. It was one of my patients. And this was a patient who had passed away earlier that evening. For just a second, I sat there and tried to rationalize it because logically, I knew that wasn't possible. But emotionally, I knew exactly who it sounded like. I stood up and started walking down the hallway until I got to her room. And as I got to the doorway, the call light turned on right in front of me. But there was no one inside the room. No one had been in there for hours. And I just stood there staring at it all. I didn't finish my shift. I called and told my supervisor that I was sick, waited for the replacement nurse, and left. I never worked another night shift again, and I left the nursing home about 6 months later. I don't blame her, not even one little bit, because I would be so freaked out. Hospitals and nursing homes already have that feeling, that negative, dark, heavy feeling just because they're such a difficult place to be in. People are going there at the worst times of their lives. There's so much that happens there, especially if you're in a nursing home because there's so much death and illness that happens there. So I'm not surprised that we hear about so many paranormal experiences there. But hearing someone call my name, especially when it's a patient that you know passed away, would be a little bit too much for me. And I would have definitely ran for the hills. So thank you for sharing your story, Jessica. And I do not blame you. I hope that you are in a job that you like much better today. All right. Story number 3 is called The Woods. And this one is completely different, but somehow just as unsettling. And it's very similar to a story that we had earlier in the season. Similar but different, and that'll make more sense in a minute. And this is from someone who also wishes to remain anonymous. They said, I hike alone all the time. I'm not someone who scares easily, but this is the only time I've ever felt like I needed to leave immediately. I was about 3 miles into a trail I had done before. No one else was around, and this trail didn't have cell service once you got about 3 to 4 miles into it. It was just quiet. But then I heard it, my name, behind me. I turned around expecting to see another hiker because I had befriended several other hikers that liked this trail. But when I looked around, there was no one. So I called out just in case they had walked out of my view, but there was no response. So I kept going, and a few minutes later, I heard it again, a little closer this time. And something about it felt off. Like it sounded like my name, but it wasn't quite right. Like someone was trying to say it, but didn't fully know how. And that's when I started to feel really uncomfortable. I picked up my pace, and then it happened again, right behind me. I could even feel their breath on my neck. And of course, when I turned around, there was nothing there. No movement, no sound, but it felt like someone was standing there just out of sight staring at me and somehow matching my pace. So I took off running and I ran until I got out of that trail. I have no idea what I encountered, but it scared me so bad that I haven't gone back to that trail since. The almost right detail is what freaked me out the most about this particular story. Like the spirit was trying to lure them into some sort of trap or unsafe place. And being all alone in the woods, I mean, that's already creepy, but this would have just absolutely terrified me. So I don't blame them for not going back out to that trail. And this is why I don't hike. I've heard so many paranormal experiences or true crime cases that are connected to hiking, and those overshadow any desire I have to try it. So I will happily stay in the four walls of my house. And our last story, story number 4, comes from Diamond. And Diamond says, I live alone, or at least I thought I did. I moved into my apartment about a year ago, top floor. There was no one else above me, and I loved the view. At first, everything was completely normal. It was really quiet and peaceful, and I rarely heard my neighbors. But after a few weeks, I started hearing footsteps at night that were pacing directly above my bedroom, which made absolutely no sense because the only thing above my bedroom was the roof. So I reported it to management. They told me it's the roof up there, which I already knew. And I said, well, could it possibly be an animal? But I was trying to figure out how an animal would have gotten up that high. So I tried to ignore it until one night I heard my name from above me. I sat up, looked around, because at first I was confused as to where it was coming from, but then I heard 3 knocks on the ceiling right above my bed. Slow and deliberate. I grabbed my phone and just sat there, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I needed to call the police. Then I heard it again, my name. But this time it wasn't above me, it was in the hallway right outside my bedroom door. I panicked, thinking someone had broken into my apartment. I called the police and locked myself into my walk-in closet. The police came, and of course, there was no one there. The next day, I asked management to check the roof. Maintenance had access, so I was convinced someone was playing a prank on me. They let me check with them for peace of mind. But the roof was completely empty. There were no signs of someone being up there. But in the middle of the roof, right above where my bed would be, there were 3 dents, as if someone had been banging on the roof directly above my bedroom. It scared me so bad that I broke my lease, moved back in with my parents for a few months until I could find a new place. I still don't know if what I experienced was paranormal or if someone was up there trying to prank me. And I agree with Diamond. Like, I'm kind of wondering, like, was it paranormal or was this like an actual crime that was getting ready to be committed? Like, was this someone who's playing a prank or maybe had ill intentions? It makes me wonder because roof access is pretty limited. I've worked in hotels and for different types of, apartment complexes, and usually your roof access is very, very small number of people who actually can get up there. So if it was an actual person, it would be someone connected to the maintenance crew potentially, but I don't know if it's paranormal or not, but it's definitely scary. And I'm so glad that she broke her lease and got out of there because it was just an unsafe situation in general, whether it be ghosts or like crime related. There's something about your name that just makes situations like this feel more personal. And because they feel more personal, they're twice as scary because it's not just random, it's targeted. So tonight, if you hear someone call your name, just make sure you know exactly who it is before you answer. And if you have a story like this, send it in because I would love to hear about it. I have a feeling this is not as rare as we think. And that brings us to the end of this episode of The Spooky Files. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Follow me on social media. Leave a comment because I love hearing from all of you. If you have a story that you would like me to share on the podcast, you can send it to the spookyfilespodcast@gmail.com or check out the spookyfilespodcast.com and fill out the Contact Us form. I read every single email or message, and it helps us to build a community of people that don't just love spooky stories, but want a safe space to talk about all the things we don't always admit out loud. Make sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. If you're looking for more paranormal content, check out my other podcast, Hoosier Myths and Legends, where my sister and I share all things spooky from the state of Indiana. We start season 7 at the end of May. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep it spooky, my friends.